Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this video we're going to be opening a couple expansion packs or promo packs for the game Zombicide. This comes from a handful of individuals compiled together in order to release this. We have CMON Games, Guillotine Games, IDW Games, and Nickelodeon, obviously all part of getting this monumental 35 years of TMNT out and into the Zombicide world, which I thought was really cool. So the second they announced this, I picked these up right away. Now, for those of you that are interested in these, I believe they're selling them at cons and things like that, but there was an exclusive pre-order window that CMON released earlier on, a few months back, in order to pick these up, and these are going to be able to be compatible with Zombicide 2.0. So when we open up these boxes, you will see all of those components lining up with the new look and feel from Zombicide 2.0, which recently wrapped up on Kickstarter as well. So if you're a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and you'd like the idea of using these characters in that game, these are going to be the packs for you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look, starting with pack number 1. TMNT pack number 1. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Foot Clan made an uneasy truce to stop the zombie invasion. Add these iconic characters as survivors in any of your modern Zombicide games. This pack includes survivor ID cards for both the Classic Edition and also the upcoming second edition of Zombicide. So just want to talk about that really quickly because there's two really important things to note there. First off, all the characters in this box, even though there are heroes and villains mixed, are all going to be used in a survivor capacity within Zombicide. So that's something to note, that these aren't, the enemies at least, are not going to be used as abominations, which is probably what a lot of people assume. So it's going to be pretty cool that they've kind of formed a truce and now you can actually use Shredder as a survivor alongside Leonardo, for instance. So that's quite interesting. And also down below here, one thing I didn't mention at the beginning of this video was the fact that there are cards also for the Classic Edition. Now, I picked this up for the second edition because I currently don't own any Zombicide content at all anymore, as I've played through a number of those games in the past and already basically spent an insane amount of time with that game. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2.0 is going to do, plus also what they're going to do with that digital bridge they're essentially creating there with Tubaru, and if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, but basically that system's going to allow for more of a digital enhanced version of Zombicide, and I'm kind of interested to see how that's all going to pan out. I also think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are pretty cool, so I decided to grab the packs for that reason. It's pretty awesome that I can go ahead, if I ever picked up the classic versions of Zombicide, and still use these characters. So that was a wise decision on their part to include those cards. Second paragraph here says the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles classic weapons are also included as equipment cards. Simply shuffle them into your equipment deck, as any survivor may wield these weapons. And this is another thing I thought was interesting, that the Turtles, for instance, aren't actually starting with their normal weapons to begin. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Like Donatello's not going to have his staff, essentially. So it's just kind of like, you're going to have to find these weapons, or any survivor can potentially stumble upon these weapons in the game and use them, but you won't get them out of the gates. Now, technically, if you wanted to kind of bend the rules, you could start them with their weapons if you really wanted to. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, but it sounds like they're supposed to be shuffled in based on the box here. So that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead, dive inside, take a look at the actual miniatures and the cards up close. When you open up the pack, this is what you're going to see. 4 miniatures staring right back at you. You're also going to find yourself some 2.0 version cards for each of those characters that look quite a bit different than the ones underneath you can see. And underneath of these 2.0 cards, you're also going to find the weapons as well. I've already gone ahead and taken off all of the plastic wrap for all of these items so we can look at them one at a time. So let's go ahead and start with a couple close-up shots of the miniatures. So we'll start things off here with Donatello. You can see that his staff is quite bent up there, but again, remember, with any miniature, anytime you have these really thin pieces, you're going to be able to easily get them back into place. So I'm not concerned about this at all. I've had this happen across numerous games, no matter what. Basically, you're just going to go ahead and heat the miniature up underneath some hot water, and then you're going to reposition this piece down here, which is bent down, to the position that you'd like it to be in, and then you're going to run some really cold water over top of it in order to basically solidify it back into place. So again, notice that there is a bend right now, but there's certainly won't be once I go ahead and do that nice little trick. The actual detail on Donatello himself is really aggressive. I like it a lot. It's very well done, and painting wise, you're going to have a field day with this one. It's also a very, very dynamic pose, and I'm liking it. Next up, we have Leonardo, and you can see he has some very thin pieces of plastic for his swords, but they're perfectly straight for the most part. They're almost amazingly perfectly straight. There's just a little bowing there on one side of that sword. This one over here is almost perfect. So just a quick adjustment on that and they'll be flawless. But again, a very nice pose, nice detail. And the one thing I'm noticing with these ones that I really like is that I'm noticing that the actual size of the miniature is a little bit bigger than what you'd expect from the miniatures inside of Zombicide. Now, I don't know if in 2.0 they're going to be a little scaled a little bit larger, but this one's actually quite large in comparison. I believe these are even a little bit bigger up from the original classic version Survivor miniatures. But again, this is a special box, so they might have been going for additional detail, so they kind of raised up the size of them. But overall, very, very happy with what I'm seeing here. Next up, we have the miniature Krang. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a nice little turnaround with him. Again, you'll notice that there's actually a different shading for this particular miniature than the other one in terms of color. And again, none of these are painted when I say shading, but just the actual color of the miniature is different. This one's pose, I think, is probably the most standard of all of them. Probably could have used with a little bit more excitement, but the actual miniature itself and its detail in terms of what you're going to be able to paint to this thing is really, really nice. But I think the pose could have been a little bit more exciting. Overall, pretty good. Next up, we have the one, the only Shredder himself, another survivor that you can bring into the game. Another really cool pose. He's not actually moving, he's just standing still, but the wind is blowing through his cape. Give you a little shot all the way around of him, but that's a really, really cool pose. Even if it's just him standing still, the cape gives it a lot of kind of a very dynamic look. He's got his swords off to the side and his hilt there, and looks awesome all the way around. So a really nice bonus to picking these things up in advance prior to 2.0 actually landing is we get to see some of the components that are actually going to be in 2.0. So in this case here we have Leonardo, and you can see all the skills there on the left. Again, a very different layout than what we're used to in the classic version of Zombicide. And then of course the tracking there for his health on the far right. So he's got a whole bunch of different abilities that are going to charge up based on the level that he's going through: blue, yellow, orange, and red. Of course, once he gets to red, you've got availability across all of these, which is pretty wild, as ticks his basically his marker all the way up the track. And I'll flip this over to the opposite side so you can see that. So you got some art there on the opposite side, which is really nice. You can see it says 2019 right there. We'll go ahead to the next one, Donatello. So again, very nice artwork. And I didn't really mention the artwork, but I love it automatically just because it's the Turtles. And again, you got all your abilities here on the side, and you're tracking over here for your health. Flipping it over, you have the art as well. Next up, we have Shredder. I've always found with most of the stuff with CMON Games, these are great pictures to use when trying to paint these miniatures. So you can use them basically placing this thing right beside the miniature as you paint it to give you a really good idea of those colors you're trying to nail. Shredder's got some amazing purple going on in here, so in his cape and stuff like that with different highlights. So that would be a really fun one to paint up. Flipping it over to the opposite side, you get kind of a full view of him. And last but not least, we have Krang here. So there's another idea of how you could potentially paint him up. And again, artwork is awesome, as it typically is with CMON Games. So those are the 4 2.0 dashboards. Next, we have 3 item cards to go through. The first one here is Leonardo's Ninjato, and you can see here there's going to be 2 of them, and this weapon is silent. And it's going to be within a range, of course, of the same hex or square that you're currently in. You can roll 2 dice, 4+ to hit, and it does 2 damage, which is pretty deadly. You can pair these up as they're dual-handed weapons. You can have both of them go at the same time, giving you even more dice, even more of a deadly attack. So 2 of those in there, and then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Donatello's bow staff, and again a range 0, 2, and a 3 to hit, so a little more power, a little better chance at least of hitting, but again can't be paired up with 2 of the swords as Leonardo's can, but still doing 2 damage, which is quite nice. I'll flip this over to show you the back of the card as well. Lines up with that classic Zombicide look. And then last but certainly not least is the classic Zombicide dashboard. So this is where you can use these in the older classic version of Zombicide, not a problem at all. So there you go. And you're going to see all the abilities again across the top. This is laid out in a more efficient way in the 2.0 card, but it's also a lot smaller because it fits inside the dashboard. These were the dashboards back in the day for Zombicide, so a lot larger. Flipping this over to the opposite side, I wonder, yes, there is some really nice artwork. So that's another huge plus of having a big dashboard is, well, there's beautiful artwork on the back, so that's pretty cool. And it might be the exact same for all of them, but either way, we'll go through each of them really quickly so you can see them all. I imagine that the artwork is probably similar. Yes, indeed, because all 4 characters are mentioned, so no need to flip them over any further. We got Shredder here, following the same pattern of abilities we saw earlier in the 2.0 card. And finally, we have Krang. So that is going to do it for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pack number 1, celebrating 35 years of TMT, at least for pack 1, as I mentioned. We need to move to pack 2 now to get the other 2 turtles and a couple other villains that you can use all as survivors in the game. So this is what pack number 2 looks like. When you crack inside of it, you'll see 4 miniatures we'll go over in a second. You'll also see the Zombicide 2.0 cards. I've already unpacked them from their wrap, as well as the item cards underneath, and even further below that, we have very much underneath the miniatures, the original classic dashboards. So we'll start things off with Raphael and his 2 sais in hand, and we'll go ahead and spin around so you can see the detail on him. His bandana's blowing in the wind there, which looks pretty awesome. He's got his knee pads. Again, the turtles are big individuals. They're mutants, that is, so they've got massive muscles. You'll even see it in their calves on the back here. Raphael's calves are massive, and of course the other ones are probably as well. The shells here on the back of these turtles look really, really good. There's lots of detail and nice lines inside of them, giving them a lot of really, if you wanted to do even just some straight up dry brushing to this thing, it would really pop that detail right out of there. So these are going to look good no matter what level you go to. Quite happy overall with the pose as well, and these are actually quite straight in terms of his weapons overall. Next up, we have one of my personal favorites, Michaelangelo with his nunchucks. Again, a very cool pose, hitting wind all around him, so his bandana is flying around in the air. He's got his 2 in hand, and he is geared up and ready to rock, so we'll go ahead and flip him around so you can see the back. Again, very different. Even on the shell here, he's got some packs attached to the back of him as well here. Added detail, which looks pretty good. He is awesome. Looks really, really good. Quite happy with all 4 of these. So let's move on to the 2 villains in the box that, again, as I mentioned many times before, can be used as survivors. Next up here, we have Rocksteady, and this guy looks absolutely huge. He's got himself his nice pistol there. His detail all the way around is really fantastic as well. All the different weapons attached to his back, you can see there. His packs on him. He's got his horn is really sharp. It actually is quite sharp on the top. Looks really, really good, and of course he's just a beast all the way around. He's got bigger biceps than anyone on the turtle side, but again, a very, very cool miniature overall. And last but certainly not least, we have Bebop, and this is quite the dynamic pose as well. He's got his gut hanging out there. It's looking pretty awesome. He's got his bat. He's got a bunch of little packs attached to him. Detail looks really good all the way around. His pants looking pretty awesome. That's right, even pants can look cool. Again, I would really like to dry brush these, even at a bare minimum, just to get that detail to pop out that much more. But I'm really excited that they allowed the villains in this to actually not be in the abomination capacity, although that would have been cool, and that's kind of what I expected. But allowing them to be survivors hopes, basically the aim is that I can get them into a team and get them to the table more often and see them more often as survivors, versus if they were abominations, they would be buried in a pile of cards until you hope to draw them and then run into them. But that also would have had its pros as well. Maybe in the future somebody will create third-party cards for them to be used or something like that, that we can maybe print and add in somehow, although I'm sure that's pretty difficult to do. But maybe with an old back of an old Zombicide card I don't care about, I could basically make that work somehow. That actually wouldn't be all that bad. and then come up with some abomination stats for them. But either way, in terms of how they're packaged in this box, Survivor sounds pretty good to me. And last but not least, we have the dashboards for the Classic Edition. Again, everything here is going to line up exactly with the 2.0 cards we already saw. So I will flip this over so you guys can actually see the backside of one of these cards and the artwork there, because that's probably one of the coolest parts for the Classic Edition, being that I won't be using it in that fashion, most likely. But there's a lot of you out there that have the original Zombicides, and this is going to be how you get them in the game right away without having to wait until 2.0 lands. So I'll just go through these quite quickly. The artwork again on all of the actual dashboards, even the 2.0 ones, was fantastic. Carries over to Classic as well. Looking pretty good. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up the unboxing for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pack number 1 and 2 for the 35 years of TMNT. They look really, really good. I cannot wait to actually try them out in Zombicide 2.0. Again, if you're looking for these now, and the pre-order window obviously has already closed for these from CMON, you might be able to find them through CMON during conventions or in the second-hand market as well. If you're checking out eBay, expect to probably see a price hike in terms of people reselling these things, but I'm definitely holding on to the ones that I purchased because I want to try them out in 2.0 and see how much I like them. Plus, even just for the miniatures alone, they're pretty cool and very nostalgic. So thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.